You're watching the Scottish Football Zone with all the build-up and reactions.
Hello, this is a very early show, the first show we've did of the season. It's actually before 6 o'clock as well, but don't tell my boss that because I'm not allowed to do the show. Oh, I forgot, I've not got a boss, it's me. So welcome to the show, welcome to the Scottish Football Zone tonight, looking at Kairat against Celtic in the Champions League, and full house for this one. Big show, big competition, so it needs a big team putting together. Don't know why I'm here then, but the rest of the guys can do all the donkey work for me, as I say, in my old five-a-side team. Delighted to have Tino back from the Celtic Exchange podcast. Tino, how are you?
I'm great, Mikey, and thanks for having us on. It's been a while, actually, since I've been on the show, so looking forward to this one. I'm all good with the early start and looking forward to chatting it through with you and the guys.
Yep, and also we've got Robbie and Ethan as well. They don't need any introduction to the show. They're kind of like old hands doing the show now. So before we dive in to talk about the game tonight, I believe, Robbie, you've got the team news for tonight's game.
In goals for Celtic, it is Schmeichel. Back four is Ralston, Carter Vickers, Scales and Kieran Tierney. In the midfield, it is Benjamin Nigel, Callum McGregor and Rio Hatate. And the front three is Yang, Forrest and Maeda through the middle.
There we go. Instant reaction to the team news. Tino, Ethan, any surprises there?
After you, Ethan.
I don't think there's really any surprises. The only position I think was maybe up for contention was between James Forrest and Arne Engels. I think it maybe pushed Benjamin Negan out to the wing as he done on the weekend and get Arne Engels in. Obviously, he takes the set pieces, but James Forrest, fresh after the weekend, so you can understand why he's come in. One change from last week's game, and it's the one he made at half-time when he brought Adam Ida off. Adam Ida obviously on the bench despite that injury news. But Yang gets the chance on the wing, and I think that was the thing I was crying out for Brendan Rodgers, that he plays Yang and James Forrest in their strongest positions, which is for James Forrest obviously on the right and Yang on the left. When he came on last week, he looked good when he was on the left, and then he sort of came out of the game a little bit, especially when he get moved over to the right-hand side.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of movement in Celtic's front line at this moment in time, mostly because we don't have the guys in that we should have. So, we need to make do with the guys that are available just now. And I think, and it'd be good to hear the thoughts of yourself and the guys, but I think it's probably the strongest front three we could go with. I don't know if Adam Ida's fully fit anyway, but he's certainly out of form. So Maeda gets the nod through the middle, and as Ethan rightly says, the two wingers in their preferred side. My only question mark as such, and it's not a huge one, is that I thought Arne Engels might have come back in. I thought Benjamin Negren, he was good at the weekend, don't get me wrong. 2 goals will do his confidence the world of good, but he wasn't great in the heart of that midfield last week. Don't get me wrong, nobody was great last week, but I thought Engels came in and gave a bit of energy, and I thought he might have got the nod, but I've got no big issues with that, generally speaking.
Obviously, Brendan Rodgers said yesterday that Adam Iga travelled with the squad as well, but obviously he's not 100% there yet. We were talking before we come on air, about you and Robbie was talking about Shane Yamada. Obviously, yes, he missed a few chances on Saturday, and to be honest, he should have got a hack the chances that he missed, but it's all saying in football where it's better to be there than not be there, and obviously that's his that's his job. But were you surprised that he wasn't in the starting 11 tonight?
There's an even better saying, an older saying, it's better to score goals than not to score goals. I prefer that one. I wasn't totally surprised. No, I wasn't surprised at all that he's not started tonight, but he may well have a part to play. I think we know in this day and age with the 5 subs rule that the bench can play a huge part, particularly in what's going to be quite a humid stadium. It's X meters, 100 meters above sea level, all these kind of things. So there'll be a bit of humidity there and a bit of a challenge for the guys on that front. And some players may flag, after an hour or maybe even less. And on that note, then Yamada and Bernardo and Engels and whoever else, either if involved, these guys might well have an important part to play. So now Shin Yamada, he'll have more opportunities to impress, but it's the right call not to start him tonight.
I'd love to ask you guys in terms of, there has been so many factors playing into Celtic's trip out of Kairat. The heat seems to be another big factor as well. In terms of the way the game will go tonight, I mean, you look at last week, and I know football is not exactly played on paper, but you look at the stats and the way Celtic dominated with the ball. What do you think needs to change in this game compared to last week? Do you think it is just trying to find that cutting edge? Because I feel like it's going to be hard to keep the energy levels the same as you maybe can do at Celtic Park. As you mentioned there, the heat will play a big factor in the game on the players. They'll start getting tired after a while. So do you think it's a case of maybe needing to take your chances when they come?
Definitely. I think there was an intensity lacking last Wednesday at Celtic Park, and particularly the first half, we tried to up it a wee bit in the second half, but you shouldn't have to wait, to the second half or later before you do so. So I think Rodgers will be really clear with the players that they need to come out the traps here. You certainly don't want to get into half time or 60 minutes in or later, nothing each. That could lead to some tension and that might affect some decision making. So my general thoughts would be take the handbrake off from the first whistle, go and express yourself, go and be the talented players that you are, the talent that brought you to Celtic in the first place. And the hope would be, for us as fans as much as anyone else, an early goal just to settle everything down and to let Celtic play ball.
Yeah, and I would agree with Tino there. I think that it might be a slightly different game. Obviously, Kairat playing at home, they need to score as well as Celtic do, so it might be a bit more open. And I know we don't know a lot about Kairat and the players specifically, but I'd say to their key players, they made 2 changes. Dastan Satpayev obviously misses out with that silly yellow card he picked up at the end of the match at Celtic Park. But the other player who drops out and he's not even in the squad is Ed Milson, the big striker who nearly scored from the halfway line, of course. He was a lot of their game plan where they were sort of chipping the ball to him and trying to win the second ball, where they've made the 2 changes. They brought in a left back for one of the attackers, so obviously a bit of a shuffle around there, but they've not got that big aerial presence and big target man up front, so it maybe gives away that they're going to play the game slightly differently, and maybe that'll leave a more open game which suits Celtic a bit more.
Of course, the old man in the team is James Forrest. Now, the Celtic fans are divided, and obviously, I don't know about your viewers and your podcast, Tino, but listen, he still gives a job for Celtic, say what you want about him, he's still a very, very good player and a kind of senior player, very, very senior player in the Celtic team, and he could be the man tonight.
He's just continued to show up for Celtic. He's a really good professional, and I think you can see the way that he looks. I think he's 34 now, James Forrest, but he's in great shape. He's physically well honed, and he's sharp and he's athletic, and his first touch is class. It's exceptional. I just think that at this moment in time, though, we shouldn't be relying on James Forrest to start games of this magnitude, of this importance. And I say that with all respect to James Forrest, who I'm a huge fan of. I think he's best suited, as most 34-year-olds would be, 34-year-old wingers, to coming off the bench and having an impact. And if Celtic had more depth in their squad, if we had a Jota available or a Nicholas Kuhn before selling him, James Forrest would be nowhere near the lineup, but he could come in and have an impact on the hour mark. And I think we'd all be happy with that. So, listen, I'm fully behind James, and I hope he does the business once again tonight. But we find ourselves here as a combination of James looking after himself and Celtic not quite doing the transfer business they should.
Are you guys happy enough? So I was just going to say, are you guys happy enough as well with Liam Scales at the back? I've spoke to a few Celtic pals of mine. I think they've been fairly critical of Liam Scales the last couple of games. I know different factors have sort of played into that. He has been pushed maybe out to left back where he's not as comfortable, I'd say. Are you guys happy enough with him next to Vickers tonight?
I'll let you go first, Ethan, and I'll decide after you tell me yours.
Yeah, I might have a very different opinion to Tino and a lot of Celtic fans, but I think Liam Scales is a decent player. I think when he plays for Celtic, most of the time he gives his best. And yes, of course, he's not on the same level as Cameron Carter-Vickers, but the amount of money you could spend and not get a player as good as Cameron Carter-Vickers on that side could be quite a lot. So I think Liam Scales, he's the best. He's the best centre back in terms of on the ball, progressing the ball. And I know sometimes he looks a bit slow and he looks a bit uncomfortable on it. But in terms of passing out from the back, dribbling out from the back, he is the best centre back at Celtic. And yes, he looks very uncomfortable when he moves to left back. And I don't know. I imagine he's going to have to do that tonight. And then I imagine it'll be Dane Murray I'd imagine it'll be Dane Murray and not Jemai Simpson-Pusey that comes on when Kieran Tierney inevitably comes off around the 60, 70 minute mark. But yeah, I think Scales gets a hard time from Celtic fans, and I think he's a decent option. I'm not saying he's the best player in that starting 11 by any stretch, but I think he's a decent player and he gets a hard time.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. That's exactly where I'm at. I think Liam Scales, I really admire Liam Scales for getting the most out of his ability. That's all you can ask of any player. I think he's very committed. He gives everything he's got. And at times, there is a limitation to what he can offer, but you can't criticise him for that. You've got the ability you've got, and that's kind of fixed to an extent. And I think at the moment, and again, it's kind of similar to the point I made on James Forrest, Liam Scales is starting games for Celtic because we haven't invested in a better option at the moment. I'm not convinced even when he's fit if Austin Trusty is better. Jemai Simpson-Pusey might do something. And I like Dane Murray, but Dane Murray's obviously got some time to go to build up to the level required to consistently start games for Celtic. So on paper tonight, James Forrest is probably the right start and Liam Scales is probably the same.
Tino, what's the views of the Celtic fans? Obviously, if you haven't checked the Celtic Exchange podcast out, check it out. Tino hasn't sent me a fiver to say that, but I'll give you my address after the show if you want to know. But what's the views of the fans in terms of like sack the Borg or all this kind of like carry on? I mean, I saw a banner outside the front door before Saturday's game as well. What do you make of it?
Just first of all, we are the second best podcast after the Scottish Football Zone, but we can discuss that at a later time. I've got mixed feelings on the sack the board chat. I can 100% understand someone venting a frustration and chanting that during the game. If that's how they feel, it's just not my style. I just wouldn't chant that whilst the team are trying to win an important game of football. That's where we found ourselves last Wednesday. It was fairly vocal at times getting into that second half. So I've got zero problems with someone doing it. It just wouldn't be me. And then, we put that out on our show, or I put my opinion out on our show last week. And then inevitably the pushback was, well, when are they meant to do it, Tino? And it's fine to do it whenever you like, do it during, before, after games. It just wouldn't be my take on things in terms of trying to get the result for the team. But the frustration here at Celtic, it's a situation of our own making. It comes through this dilly-dallying with transfers and taking it down to the wire. And we're probably going to be chock-a-block between now and Monday night, trying to get last-minute deals in, loans with an option to buy, maybe even shipping a couple of guys out. And it doesn't need to be this way. It just seems like such a strange way to do business. But it is what it is. It's here to stay by the looks of it, at least for the short term. So we just need to get on with it. But I fully understand the frustration, and if fans want to chant and protest, then absolutely they're entitled to do that.
I know you've. I was just going to say, I know you've not got no long left. Is there any chance we can get a score prediction for tonight?
You can. I've been consistent on it, and it makes me nervous even just to say. I think it'll be a nervy 1-0 win for Celtic tonight. I said that last week. I was at the game with my dad last Wednesday, and we were chatting after the game, and that was my take on it. That I think, listen, Celtic absolutely should be strong enough to win this game. If we don't win, it's nothing to do with the transfer activity, generally speaking. The 11 that start this game and the guys on the bench should be strong enough to beat Kairat Almaty. That's the bottom line. So there's no excuses. Brendan Rodgers said in his press conference he doesn't want excuses. Humidity, travel, altitude, all of those things. Celtic should win. I think they will win, but I think it'll be nervier than we hope for. So I'm going to go for 1-0. Is it too soon to ask you, lads? Are you going to catch that later in the show?
I've got my prediction. I've been pretty strong on 2-0. it's not going to be comfortable. I think Celtic maybe get one in the first half and then maybe get a late goal and Kairat have to open up and look for an equaliser. But yeah, I agree. I think it'll be a nervy evening for Celtic fans.
Yeah. What about you lads, Robbie? What do you think? As a neutral, where would you be taking it?
I'm going to go for one each, and I think Celtic win it on penalties. I think Celtic score early on. I think Kairat score late on, and then I think Celtic just sneak it on penalties.
I don't have that in me. I've too many penalty shootouts recently, Hampden and Aberdeen and Rangers and all that stuff. I hope you're right with the end product, Celtic going through, but penalties, I'm shivering at the thought.
So, Tino, I know that you've got to run and do a few things before the big kickoff. So thanks for coming on, and I'm hoping that we'll get you back on with Celtic in the Champions League.
I hope so. I really do. But listen, a pleasure to speak to the three of you guys tonight. Enjoy the game, whatever you guys are up for it, and thanks for having me on. I'll speak to you soon.
Cheers, Tino.
See you, lads.
Yeah. There we go. That was Tino from the Celtic Exchange podcast. And if you haven't listened to it, it's a good listen, and follow them on Twitter as well. But as Tino said, the Celtic Exchange podcast is number 2 right next to the Scottish Football Zone as well. So we're building up to the game in Kilmartin against Celtic. It is a 5:45 kickoff tonight. Ethan, you were at the game on Saturday. How did you feel about? Well, obviously, I don't know if you saw this before the game, but how did you feel about the banners outside the front door about back? What was it? Something like sack the Borg, back the team, or something like that. And
was that on Saturday? I thought that was an old one.
Maybe it was.
There was one in the ground. There was one definitely in the ground, though.
I guess. Maybe it was an old one, but somebody put the photo up on Facebook on Saturday. But maybe it was a old one from the 90s or something, or that.
No, but I think it might have been from. Maybe you were right. Maybe it was outside the ground, but I think it was maybe from the COVID times where there was obviously the fan really fan discontent. But no, there was certainly one in the stadium. I can't remember exactly what it said, but it was something to do with being not very happy with the board. And a lot of Celtic fans obviously aren't at the moment, and you could say rightfully so, because I think the board haven't been ambitious enough. They've took massive risks with this Champions League qualifier coming up, and I've said it a few times, they're just lucky that they have been faced with a team like Kairat Almaty. No disrespect to them, but they could have got a few tougher draws where it would have been clubs of similar financial level. Celtic still would have been favourites, but they are lucky in that sense. But Kairat, obviously, they still have a massive chance. The biggest game in their history tonight, and financially, and just if they get to say they beat Celtic, it would be a massive night for them as a club, having never even made it to the Europa League. Obviously, they're guaranteed that now, but I think it's the biggest game in years for Celtic as well. And if they were to lose tonight and go out, then I think it would roll back. Celtic would roll back years in the progression. So massive night for both teams. Obviously, we're looking at it from a Celtic end, but I think Celtic will win, but I don't think it'll be convincing. I think Kairat will make it a difficult game like they did last Wednesday.
I know, Robbie, that we said it on the show last week as well after the game, that it doesn't mean to say that you haven't heard of Kairat. It doesn't matter. They're in Europe. You've got to show them kind of like respect, because every team is in Europe, whether it's the Champions League, the Europa Cup, or Conference League, or whatever the case may be. You've still got to show them respect, and I think Celtic will do that tonight.
Aye, but you don't want to show them too much respect. Celtic need to go out there and be dominant, get at them, try and get the game. wrapped up, I'm going to say, by half time. Celtic, Tino was right earlier when he said Celtic don't want to let this get to the 60, 70 minute mark and they still win a game, because that gives Kairat probably more advantage than it does Celtic. I just think it's a tie that Celtic should win. We know that. I know, as Ethan said earlier, no disrespect to Kairat, but you look at the UEFA rankings and the ratings that given, and I know football's no played on paper, I said that earlier, but I think there's like 5 or 6 teams in Scotland that are higher rated than Kairat are, so that shows the sort of level that we're dealing with here. But it'll be interesting to ask Ethan about, you look at your neighbour at Rangers and how they're getting on the Champions League journey. They got probably picked apart by Bruce, to be honest with you. How confident are you that Celtic always seem to find a way? That's the one thing that I think you can take into domestically as well. You look at Rangers' first opening 3 games, dropping points in all 3 of them. I know it's kind of different in Europe, but you can see they're starting to struggle in Europe a bit now as well. How do you feel that, do you feel a bit more positive that, Celtic will find a way? Because that usually seems the case in these type of games. Celtic can always find a way to win games.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think Celtic have shown, certainly domestic, maybe less on a European front than a lot of Celtic fans would like, but Celtic should be beating Kairat Almaty over 2 legs, as we said, and usually lightning doesn't strike twice. When you got that sort of unexpected result at Celtic Park, you would expect Celtic to do the business, even though it's treacherous travel and the heat and whatever else we've mentioned, but Celtic should still have enough. And I think back to that, obviously not the same scale because Kairat are a better team, but think back to Lincoln Red Imps when Celtic obviously went over there and lost famously in Brendan Rodgers' first game, competitive match as Celtic manager, and then obviously turned it around at Celtic Park. I think Celtic will have too much for Kairat, and I don't look too much into the UEFA rankings, but one thing that I do kind of look at is the squad values of the clubs on Transfermarkt, which again isn't always the most reliable thing, but usually it gives you a rough ballpark, and Kairat are sitting around mid-table in the Scottish Premiership, so there's no excuse why Celtic shouldn't be beating them over 2 legs, and I think they will do, and if they don't, then it's an ultimate embarrassment for themselves and Scottish football, and it'll be a massive step backwards, because I think it's the first time ever Celtic would have the chance to qualify for the Champions League in 4 consecutive seasons, so yeah, that's a massive milestone to achieve tonight as well.
To try and, I'm not going to claim another ins and outs of Kairat, but to try and give them a bit of credit, the Kazakhstan record against Scotland in general speaks for itself. It's never been an easy place for any team, including the national team, to play. There always is a tough game, so I get it. I know it should be a comfortable evening for Celtic and they should get the job done, but if we're going just based off of pure history, it's not going to be as easy as I think any Celtic fan maybe expects.
No, it's not going to be easy, not at all. They've shown that in the first game, I think they took a lot of people back and surprised a lot of people how actually good they are. And obviously aided by the fact Celtic were really poor on the night. But for the squad value, that you look at the squad, they looked a lot better than that. And maybe that is because Kazakhstan's a part of the world where no one really keeps an eye on it football-wise, and that's no disrespect to them as a footballing nation. I think Scotland suffers from that at points as well, where some of our club's players are sold for less than what they maybe should be, and I think in Kazakhstan they probably suffer something of the same, the fact that such a big talent like Dastan Satpayev's only going for around €4 million, which is the record fee for a player out of that league and a Kazakhstani international in general. But at the end of the day, if you look at it that way, most of Celtic should be able to field a starting 11 of players that are valued at 4 million or more. So that's the kind of thing we're talking about here, and Celtic should have too much. Although it will be difficult because, as we say, it's a big travel. The heat as well will play a part. Celtic won't have any excuses, but it will be difficult. It always is difficult going away in any competition. Never mind travelling across half the world to play this match. And I think I seen that Slovan Bratislava were complaining about the pitch as well. So, yeah, I don't know if it's going to be the most pretty game of football, but as long as Celtic get through with the £40 million and the some of the ties that go with it, then I don't think any Celtic fan will really really care in that point of view towards the team. But obviously the pressure will still be on the board to get those players in the door for the Champions League before Monday, because if you were to ask me right now, I don't think Celtic would get a single point in the league phase. I think that's how much they've dropped off since last season.
Robbie, Brendan Rodgers was talking to the media yesterday because they went out on Sunday and I think they arrived early hours of Monday, but basically he was saying that the squad is basically the same as Sakagi was only upsetting as Agam kind of like travelled, as we touched upon earlier. Then he went on to talk about the game. He says they are good side. We are in the first game we weren't at our level, but it's up to us to break them down, and we need to play our game and focus. And obviously Liam Scale said it's if we want to progress to the Champions League, it's up to us. And I know that I've said this to you guys many times when we do the show as well. You know, players and managers can say what they want to get headlines, to get clickbait, and I know the rest of it. But the fans are only interested in what they do for that 90 minutes.
Exactly that. On you go, Robbie.
No, on you go.
All right. Thank you. I was just going to say, there's fans that I believe around 300 Celtic fans that have made the ridiculous trip over there. Shows obviously the backing of the Celtic support, but I think it's costing in the region of over £500 to get there. So Celtic fans are, you could call them stupidly, pouring a lot of money to go and support their team across the world, and they expect as a bare minimum that they go through tonight, and if they don't, then there will be chaos at Celtic Park, and it might reminisce back to the sort of scenes of the COVID year when obviously they lost the league title and forfeited 10 in a row to Rangers, and I think we'll see similar levels of discontent from the support of it if it is to happen again tonight and they go out of the Champions League, because at the end of the day there's no real excuse for it. They're just not prepared well enough, and if you fail to prepare, then you prepare to fail, and that's the stance that Celtic could be taking if they don't get through tonight. And you'll have to say that the board of directors will be pretty lucky if they do.
In my opinion, this game tonight falls on the board entirely. I get it, the players should be strong enough to go out there and get the job done, and I think Rodgers and the players can take rightful criticism if they don't, but the board's got to take the brunt of this blame. You know, there's been a lot of rumours, and of course we don't know what the board's thinking is. In my opinion, I think the board are waiting till the Champions League money comes in until they start spending. So what I'd ask, I know, Ethan, it's tough as a Celtic fan to answer, but if Celtic don't get a job done tonight, what's next for the board? How much money is Rodgers going to get? What's the squad going to look like in a week? Because that's what Celtic have after this game. If they don't qualify and they don't get that big payout, what's next for Celtic?
Yeah, well, the problem is that last season, or the last few seasons even, Celtic have known they're in the Champions League, obviously with virtue of the automatic qualification for winning the Scottish Premiership. So they've known that 40 million plus whatever else you get from whatever else goes into it, that they had that money to spend on players. Yeah, last season, for example, they still left it to the very last minute to sign Arne Engels, Adam Ida and Austin Trusty. Were all quite late in the window, I remember. And that's probably why their prices were so inflated. And it's going to be the same again. The prices will be inflated because they're leaving it late to bring in players. And you don't know how much they're going to spend. It doesn't look like they're going to spend near as much as they did last summer. Because there's not time. You're looking at, 5 days or 6 days until the window shuts. So Celtic learn their fate tonight, and then you've got 6 days to go out and sign players. It's just not enough. You need to, you need to gamble. And not gamble, they are gambling, but you need to bring players in before you play the match and spend the money, because I know nothing's a formality, but you bring in quality into that squad, you're only increasing your chances of getting the 40 million that you get for qualified. They just haven't done that. They've left Brendan Rodgers in a really sticky state. he has been hung out to dry to the media for weeks now when they've asked about signings in the press conferences, and quite rightfully so, because that's what the Celtic fans want to know about. And he'll be frustrated with that. He'll feel let down the fact that he's had to go into this qualifier without any notable replacement. Well, not notable, sorry. No replacement for Nicholas Kuhn, who the Celtic board seemed to have sold under his nose. So yeah, he'll be frustrated, and I really can't see him being the Celtic manager next season, because I think he'll feel let down, as maybe we're seeing why he left and the way he did on his first spell.
Hi, Michael. I was going to say, it was interesting to hear Roger speak about something that wasn't transfers. Speaking about the actual game, it feels like all we've heard in the recent weeks is transfers this, transfers that, and I actually feel quite bad for the guy. Ethan's right, he is getting hung out to dry. He's getting made to answer all the questions for the board's actions, which I don't personally think is fair. And starting to see now, I don't know if you guys have saw it, there's a couple of rumours around Brentford and Rodgers and how they're maybe looking at him as a target for the next manager, which to me is interesting. And look, I know Rodgers, when he came back up and he signed the contract, specifically said that he would see it out. But, money does talk in football. Obviously, we don't know Rodgers' stance after this game. If Celtic want to lose, is that going to flip his mind a wee bit more? Where he wants to stay for the season. I mean, look, I think he will. I'm pretty confident, and I think he will be here till the end of the season. But you just never know in football. That's the magic of it. So I think a lot more than just the money in this situation lies on tonight. I think it lies on the group of players, because it will really hurt their mentality getting into such a big game on Sunday. I think it will hurt Rodgers. It might flip his mindset, and ultimately, with 6 days to go, we don't know what the Celtic squad's going to look like this time next week.
I think. Sorry, Ethan. No, I was just going to say, I think we'll find out if Rodgers wants to stay after tonight's game, because it's. I don't know about you, Ethan, but it's very simple. If Celtic goes out tonight, then he will be away. But on the other hand, if Celtic qualifies, I think he'll hang about till at least Christmas anyway.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the last time he obviously left for Leicester City, and Celtic fans despised his decision to go down south. But I think a lot of them are coming to the realisation that maybe he wasn't the villain and all of that. And I know he sort of left the club in a hard place, but I think when there's promises made to you about transfers and signings, and they're not sort of the board don't deliver it, then he's got every right to leave. And I think a lot of the Celtic fans are kind of looking at the situation now and going, you can't even blame the guy if he wants to move on, because ultimately the reason he's at Celtic is because he says he's a Celtic fan, playing in the Champions League, he wants to see progression in that competition. Realistically, Brendan Rodgers is a really good Celtic manager, and I think obviously he wants to win every domestic trophy. Of course he does. But he wants to see his team progress on a European stage. And they showed that last season, going toe-to-toe with Bayern Munich for 180 minutes. And there is no way Celtic are in even the same place as they were strength-wise at that point. No chance. And yeah, I just don't really see him signing a contract extension. It's strange, because I think Graham's just made the point in the chat there. If you had a manager like Brendan Rodgers, who you're looking about, he's one of the most successful Celtic managers ever. You're looking about across Europe, you're not really going to get a better manager than Brendan Rodgers to come in. I know what they got Ange Postecoglou, but that was, you feel, a bit of an anomaly with how well that went. Surely you would back Brendan Rodgers and keep him about and give him what he wants. But no, they just revert to type. And yeah, it's really strange. It's a strange situation, but I really can't see him being the Celtic manager next season. And the board have got to plan now for that being the case, because I think regardless of what happens tonight, he'll be an unhappy man, and a lot of his trust, if he did have any left, will be gone for his bosses.
It's very easy for people to say Knutsen's the answer, the Norwegian coach, Bodo Glimt. We don't know if that's going to work in this league. That's my biggest thing. Everybody says, oh, it's all right, Celtic can just go out and sign another replacement manager, and it could work out like Ange, but it could also work out like Lennon Sexton. And, Celtic can find themselves falling behind Rangers. Look, I'd fling everything at Rodgers if I was the Celtic board. You're right, Ethan, he's a known manager. He's not just done it in this league. He was successful for the large part of his spell in England as well. So, the guy knows what it takes to win. To ask you about, though, one thing that I feel is not been spoke about by any media or any fan, what about the players' mentality if you don't qualify for the Champions League? Look at guys like Callum McGregor, look at the guys that have come in, Niger, and what's he going to be thinking if Celtic are playing Champions League this season? It's his mentality. Maybe going to switch as long-term servants, maybe going to start thinking about leaving and, wanting to leave and stuff like that. It's, a lot of the talk has been about the manager in this situation, but I feel like the players need to be taken into account as well.
Yeah, exactly that. You make a really good point. Celtic it's already becoming a less attractive proposition because of how the club's being run and the fact that all these stories about the board and misdealings with players and transfers just makes it a less attractive proposition just in that. And you talk about Celtic becoming a Europa League club this season. Again, players want to play in the Champions League. If you can't play in the Premier League, then you want to play in the Champions League. And if Celtic aren't offering that, they get less quality of players. And as we know, with the Scottish coefficient, the Champions League possibilities for the champions of Scotland is only becoming less and less. And yeah, that's why I think tonight Celtic could take a step back years if they don't get through the tie tonight. And yeah, it's a really, really massive game for Celtic, and the players have got a lot of pressure on them because they've got to get the job done. But yeah, I think, as you said a few minutes ago, Robbie, the board will take the major brunt of the blame if it doesn't go well tonight.
Looking at the team, Ethan, and I thought he had quite a decent game on Saturday as well. Meiglan is basically, I know it's still early days and all the rest of it, but I think he looks quite a decent player for Celtic.
Yeah, he looked like he was kind of settling in these first few games. He was a bit quiet, not really taking the game by the scruff of the neck, but that's exactly what he done at the weekend. And okay, it's against Livingston at home, but that's a sign of maybe what's to come with Benjamin Meiglan. And he has a lot. He has, if you look at the Scottish Premiership stats, he has at the top of a lot of the sort of attacking chance creation metrics, and that's the kind of place he was in the Danish league as well. And I think it was a great signing for Celtic to get him at the price they did, because I think you're looking at least €5 million probably if he's under a good contract. Obviously, only had 6 months left. That's why Celtic got him so cheap. But yeah, I think he's a great signing. He's one that got Celtic fans excited, because if you remember, they made a lot of signings really early on in the window, and then since then it's been only really Jemai Simpson-Pusey that's been added to that group of signings. So yeah, it's really strange that Celtic just refused and neglected the squad pretty much. But obviously, I think they've got 2 signings coming in now. Sirachi, the Uruguayan left back from Boca Juniors, is going to sign on a season-long loan, it looks, to be a backup to Kieran Tierney. And then Mikael Ange-Balikwisha, I believe, signing on a 4-year deal for around €5 million from Royal Antwerp. He looks like he'll probably come right into the starting 11 for Celtic's trip to Ibrox on Sunday.
Ethan, what is the squad rotation looking like then? We look at some of these players, and I could honestly see this being close to the starting 11 that starts at Ibrox. If not, that player you mentioned there that's potentially going to sign. What's the game plan for Rodgers tonight? What changes do you think he's going to need to make? Because I don't think these players, and no disrespect to a guy like Tierney, but he's not going to exactly be able to play, over 120 odd minutes or however much it will be, and then play at Ibrox, if the game does go wrong. So, what is Rodgers maybe? I don't want to again disrespect Kairat, but is Rodgers maybe keeping one eye on Sunday, because he knows these players will be knackered by the time they arrive back in Glasgow, and then you need to prepare yourself for Sunday to take on what's another big game. So do you think he'll be keeping one eye on that as well?
Yeah, ideally, I think Celtic wrap this game up early and get to rotate how he pleases. I don't think that's going to be how it goes, and I think if you ask anyone involved with Celtic, obviously this is the first priority, getting into the Champions League, but I definitely understand your point that there is players there that you're going to need to sort of look after and before a big game at Ibrox on Sunday, because if Celtic go there and win that match, then it really does put Celtic in the driving seat for the Scottish Premiership title again this early in the season. If they lose, it's not the end of the world, but that's not the attitude of Celtic fans, of course, and they expect there to go and win regardless of the preparation with the travel back from Almaty. And I agree, Kieran Tierney will probably play about 60 to 70 minutes. Usually it'll be Austin Trusty that would come on as the left-footed centre-half. Liam Scales goes out wide. Obviously, Trusty's not in the squad, so I think it'll be Dane Murray who comes on. I don't know who will play where between Dane Murray and Carter Vickers on the left or right. Liam Scales will be pushed out again. Then I think they've not got any wingers on the bench, obviously. So that's an interesting one. I think Arnie Engels will come on. I think Paulo Bernardo will come on before Luke McKeown tonight, based off their performances the other day. Then I think Adam Ida will probably come on at some point. And then I think Johnny Kenny or Shin Yamada will come on. But it's the fact Celtic have 4 strikers in the squad and they're all on the bench tonight. It maybe shows that they need a striker, and I believe they're in the market for one, so they'll be hoping they can get one in before the deadline ends on Monday.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, guys, good before we wrap up the show as well. How do you think Celtic will approach the game tonight? Obviously, when we talk about Scottish teams going away in Europe, we always say, well, they've got to kick the game in stages, like 50 minutes, half an hour, get to half time as well. But I don't think Celtic has got that option tonight, even because obviously they have to go from the word go.
Yeah, exactly, and that's the thing that's held Celtic back recently. Over the last 2 games, certainly they've started not well. To be fair, against Kairat in the first leg and Livingston, they started the game okay, but they kind of faded in that first half, and it wasn't good enough. Against Livingston wasn't too bad at the weekend, but certainly the first half against Kairat Almaty wasn't great. If they can start the game well, assert their dominance in their play with a bit more tempo than they did in the first leg, then I think they should be okay tonight. But if they start on edge, they give Kairat invitations to come into the game, give them chances like they did. Kairat obviously scored in the first leg in the first half, then the home team will build confidence, and I think they have a sellout tonight, around 24,000 the stadium is, so I imagine that's one of the biggest attendances for a club game in Kazakhstan. Obviously it is one of the biggest games and probably the club's history, I think. Well, in the club's history, but in the sort of Kazakhstani clubs in general's history, I think the only club to make the Champions League was maybe Astana, and they only made it once. Yeah. So it's not an often occasion that Kazakhstan have a team that's this close to getting into the Champions League. So it could be a historic night for them, and there'll be a lot of fans there. Obviously, a very small percentage of that is made up of the travelling Celtic support, which will hope to have a great night and be rewarded for their travels.
I think that will play a big part in the game. That sold out fans, they're clearly up for it. They clearly look at Celtic as being weak right now, weaker than they usually are. That's not disrespect to Celtic. That's just, I feel like that's what they'll be thinking. But Michael, you spoke about the way Celtic like to play. Celtic can have as much of the ball as they want. Any team in football can have as much of the ball as they want. If they're not going to put it into the back of the net, then it's useless. We've seen Rangers in the last 3 games. We've seen them at the weekend drop yet more points, but keep them about 70% possession. Celtic against Kairat last week, 75% possession, didn't score a goal. Celtic, I can bet, will have about 60-70% possession by the end of the match. If they've not won the game, you can't be surprised that what you do with that possession. Celtic need to be quicker than it to, get at Kairat, they need to try and break them down a bit quicker. It's something that will define the game. If Celtic start off slow in that first half, it'll, the pressure will start building on them, and I don't want to, be too harsh on Daisen Maeda, but we've seen a few chances he's had now, this early in the season and into last season where he's through 1-on-1 on goal. He needs to finish it, and he makes a mistake and he doesn't do it. And I know he can do it. We've seen it. He has got that quality in him. But tonight, if an opportunity like that falls to Maeda, he will need to take it. Because if he doesn't, he will get some amount of criticism after Celtic fans as well.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely agree with that. And I think Daisen Maeda possibly suffering from not having as good players around them. I would say. I would suggest maybe in that front line. Obviously, Yang and Forrest played parts, and Adamida played parts last season, big parts at times, but they're not that sort of natural. Well, they're not as good as Kyogo, they're not as good as Jota, they're not as good as Nicholas Kuhn, and Daisuke Maeda, yeah, he has started the season slowly. He's not looked his best. He did look a bit better at the weekend when he came off the bench, set up Johnny Kenny's goal. So Celtic fans will be hoping that maybe that's the change and we see the best of him. But yeah, he should have really scored that chance last week. And that obviously comes off the back of those chances in the cup final and at Ibrox as well.
There we go. That is Rangers tomorrow night up against Club Blues or Club Brugge. Pick your name for that one. But we'll be on at 7:15 tomorrow night and then 10 o'clock after the game. But now the focus is all about Celtic on Kazakhstan. I'm not sure if they've got any nightclubs over there for the Celtic fans to enjoy themselves if they enjoy it. Yeah, it's going to be a nervous watch for a lot of Celtic fans. We'll be back on at 8 o'clock to discuss the 90 minutes, or maybe could go extra time. I'm not actually sure. But Ethan, I don't think you can take that extra time, so I'll just say 90 minutes. So we'll be back at 8 o'clock to look back on the game. My thanks to Robbie, Ethan, and Tino from the Celtic Exchange podcast, and we'll be back at 8 o'clock.
You're watching the Scottish Football Zone with all the build-up and reactions